What is it that Stargate fans want for the future of this franchise? We've got some interesting things to talk about here in this video. If you've been watching the channel for very long or reading the website at gateworld.net, you probably already know my thoughts on the matter. I would like a continuation of the existing mythology, avoiding that hard reboot. We posted some polls earlier this year that you might have seen, you might have had a chance to vote on. And the polls are still open, by the way, if you want to go and have your voices heard there. What I want to do in this video is look at the results of those polls and sort of process together what Amazon might be thinking about the future of the franchise. We also have new comments from Amazon MGM Studios head Jennifer Salke about MGM franchises generally and the James Bond franchise in particular that I think also apply to how they're thinking about Stargate. Really, this is an informal video that's meant to just start a conversation with you guys, so post your thoughts in the comments below. Go and vote in the polls if you haven't done it yet. Let's get into all this. Let's take a look here. This is the article that I posted back in May, and the video here on the channel followed soon thereafter. Would you watch a new Stargate show? I wanted to sort of take the temperature of fans at large. This is the video if you haven't seen the talking points, if they make it. Go ahead and check out that video now. You can go watch my explainer for what I mean by each of these polls, but I'll sort of try to recap this a little bit as we go on. The first poll question is just this simple. Would you watch a reboot of Stargate? And some of these polls, I recognize folks might want to choose more than one thing, so I actually set some of these polls to allow for multiple selections. Would you watch a reboot of Stargate? Yes, I'm fine with a reboot, or only if it's done right with respect, or no, any kind of reboot, and I won't even watch the pilot. I'm not even going to check out the show at all. It's this middle option is the one that I have some explainer for in that previous video and here on the article. What I mean by done right is something like J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek movie. Now, bear with me here. Aside from what you think about that creatively, any of the decisions that were made or how the movie was produced, the idea is that it has a deliberate connection to the Prime Universe, right? With Prime Spock from our Star Trek going back into the past and being involved in that story so that what becomes a new timeline still has a connection to the existing universe, the existing mythology, even uses one of the original characters. That's what I mean by a reboot that is done with respect. Something that, yes, might be willing to reset the story in some sense, but is going to do it in a way that's connected to the mythology that we know and love, that honors it, and that might even open the door for it to be continued in some way, shape, or form down the road, just as Star Trek has done with new shows set in the Prime Universe. Again, regardless of what you might think about those shows. So the results here are interesting. 31% of people who voted here, which is a little over 6,600 folks have voted so far, are totally fine with a reboot. That's surprising to me. Just reboot Stargate, do whatever you need to do, and I'll check it out. That's surprising that that's so high. Only if it's done right with respect. This was my vote. 54%. More than half of people who voted in the poll, which again, these are more core Stargate audience, right? These are folks who watched a Stargate video on YouTube or who read Gateworld, who voted in the poll. So it's the core of the core audience. 54% said if it's done right, if it respects what's come before, they're willing to give it a shot, to check it out. And then finally, 15% are just, they're not going to be in from the get-go. Any sort of reboot, they're not even going to bother with it. So this is what's probably the biggest surprise to me here. You add these together, you get 85% of core Stargate fans are okay with a reboot in some way, shape, or form, as long as it's done right. And that's kind of where I've landed, at least over the last year or so, since Amazon's deal closed in 2022, and the original Stargate TV creator Brad Wright has made it clear that they're not asking him to do anything. They seem to have passed on the pilot that he wrote for a fourth Stargate television series set in the existing continuity that he helped to create. Since Brad has started talking about the fact that, right, the Amazon seems to be ready to move on, I'm interested to see what they'll do. I locate myself here. If it's done right, if it's done with respect for what's come before, Now, I also wanted to dig into this a little deeper. So in the second question, I asked folks, would you watch a Stargate series without the original casts? You might have said a new show should have an entirely new cast. In other words, don't need to see any of the old faces. Or keep the former cast limited to guest appearances. Maybe you've got a Amanda Tapping coming in for a guest spot, or you've got a David Hewlett who shows up for a guest appearance every season or two. Or finally, that third option is bring at least some of the actors back full time, or I'm out. Somebody from SG-1, SGA, or SGU has to be on the full-time cast, or you're not going to watch it at all. Again, I'm gonna put my own vote here in the middle because I want some continuity connections. I wanted to honor what's come before. I want there to be space in the new show for somebody to show up, right? A character, a cast member. How about a Kevin Smith comes in as General Lorne? Or, the sorts of things that the Next Generation could do in episodes like Relics, where you just have James Doohan on for a guest spot. That sort of connectivity, continuity is ideal for me. But the main cast, actors who are getting a full-time paycheck and characters that are in every single episode or close to it, it's a new show. I think it's going to have a largely new cast, if not entirely. So let's see the results. 16% want an entirely new cast. 68% say, I want to see some of the former cast in guest appearances. And 16% said it's got to have some full-time cast members from the old shows. Again, this balance is about 84%, right? 84 to 16 if you add these two together. Obviously, far and away, the biggest majority of Stargate fans want to see some of the actors from the previous shows have some sort of role on the new series. New series or new movie or miniseries, whatever it ends up being. Here's the third question. Would you accept a Stargate show with a public gate? I really wanted to take people's temperature to see, right, does this need to stay a top secret military program? Or what about a new show where the general public at large is just aware of the Stargate, of alien races out there, of Earth's place in a larger galaxy, its technological advancements, its fleet of ships, etc.? Would you accept a Stargate show with a public gate? You could have chosen, go public. Let's have a Stargate show set in the public. Keep the secret, or it doesn't really matter to you either way. Let's see the results. 9% want a Stargate show that is public. 24% want it to keep the secret like the original series. Not surprising, I guess. Most folks don't mind either way, 67%. I suppose that's where I would locate myself, right? It depends on a lot of other things. Depends on the story. Depends on when in the timeline it's set. Is this a show that's set in the 2050s or something? I'll watch either way. I'm willing to check it out. That's where I would vote. I'm willing to check it out either way, as long as it's good. What about the tone of the show? Now, as we're thinking about past shows and future projects in the Stargate universe, of course, when we compare it to Star Trek, right, there's a sort of continental divide between fans of classic Trek from the 60s, from the 80s and 90s, and modern Trek, new Trek, stuff, J.J. Abrams films and Discovery and shows that have been made more recently than that. Stargate, the more I think about it, the more I feel like Stargate has already had this crisis in its fandom. It's already had that rift with Stargate Universe, because when Brad Wright and Robert Cooper created Stargate Universe, they created a show that was deliberately, tonally very different. Different in the way it's shot, different in the way it's written, different in the performances, in serialized storytelling. It was already deliberately a really different show from SG-1 and Atlantis. So we've already kind of had that fight, I think. There's already multiple camps of Stargate fans. If you don't believe me, just read the comments here on YouTube. So how about the tone of the new show? Question number 4. What tone of show would you watch for a new Stargate series? Lighter action adventure. Right here we're thinking more like Stargate SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis. A darker character drama. That's more like Stargate Universe. Or I'll try either. It just needs to be good. So again, here's a poll where you could have chosen multiple options. And let's see the results. Wow, 27% I suppose is not surprising, would like something lighter, more action-adventure like SG-1 and Atlantis. Only 6% of you specifically want a darker character drama in the vein of Stargate Universe. But this doesn't surprise me that 67%, 2/3 of you will watch the show either way. So I wouldn't necessarily read this poll as 94% are opposed to a darker character drama. No, in fact, the majority doesn't necessarily matter. As long as the show is good, as long as it's well written, as long as it is well produced and reflects the things that we know and love about Stargate. This is one of the reasons why it took me a while to get into SGU and really come to love it as much as I do the other shows. It found its whole self. When the characters started to get along, they started to treat each other more like family, and there was more humor. Once SGU sort of embraced those elements and fully folded them into its narrative, I started to enjoy the show a lot more. Not that I didn't love it before that, but it was a shock, right? When that first half of season 1 premiered, it was kind of a shock to the system for those of us who had been watching Stargate for, at that point, 12 years. So I'm here too. I'll try either way, lighter or darker, action adventure or dramatic. It just needs to be well executed. I'll be really interested to hear your continued feedback on those questions, particularly now that you've seen the poll results. What do you think of the poll results? Post a comment below, and if you want to support this video and this channel while you're at it, hit the like button. Now that you've seen the poll results, are you surprised? Are you surprised as I am that there seems to be a sort of critical mass of core Stargate fans who are willing to watch a reboot if it's done right, if it's done in a way that respects what has come before? Okay, let's switch gears here, because recently Jennifer Salke had a couple of interviews in the press. She's talking about the Lord of the Rings, right? Season 2 of the Rings of Power just wrapped up on Amazon Prime Video. But she's also answering questions about James Bond and what Amazon MGM Studios is working through now that it has all of MGM's IP, its intellectual property, and is figuring out how to make use of what it purchased for $8.5 billion a couple years back. And this was my key takeaway that I put in the headline. Jennifer Salke says fans will be patient. Fans will be... Let's look at the quote here down below. So she said in an interview with The Guardian about the future of James Bond and the fact that there's no great rush. Following Daniel Craig's last Bond movie, we knew it was going to be his final turn as Bond. What comes next for that franchise? Here's what she said. There's a lot of ideas about potential Bond actors that have popped up that I thought are interesting. I think there are a lot of different ways we can go. We have a good relationship with Eon Productions and Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, who exercise creative control over the Bond franchise. They make decisions about things like who is going to be cast to play the character next. Daniel Craig's final Bond film was No Time to Die in 2021. Salke said, "We're not looking to disrupt the way those wonderful films are made. For us, we're taking their lead." Now here's the part of the quote that jumped out to me. She said, "The global audience will be patient. We don't want too much time between films, but we're not concerned at this point." I think the same judgment probably holds for Stargate. Bond has been off the screens for going on 4 years now. For Stargate, right, if you don't count Stargate Origins, which was that low-budget web series a few years back, it's been 14 years since Stargate Universe went out of production. So the way that Jennifer Salke is talking about Bond and other franchises, they're playing the long game. They want to take time and get this right. She said, when you're looking at an iconic intellectual property like James Bond, you look at what the entire long-term future might be. Of course, you look at every facet. And she might as well, for me, be talking about Stargate here as well, because we know that when Stargate was at its height 15, 20 years ago, it was basically the second most valuable property inside MGM, second only to Bond. Stargate was $1 billion franchise. It was licensed, it was distributed globally, and made MGM a ton of money by being shown all around the world. So while she's not talking directly about Stargate, this makes sense, right? It makes sense why we haven't heard any official word 2 years after the deal closed, any official word about what they're going to do with Stargate? Are they going to make a movie? Are they going to make a new series? Is it going to be on Prime Video? Is it going to be on MGM Plus? I mean, maybe this is obvious to say, but they're taking their sweet time. Now, we're in a spot here at the end of 2024 where all those different brands that MGM owns are getting announcements. Well, they've announced a RoboCop television series. They've announced a new TV series for Poltergeist, which is another MGM property. And they've just announced a prequel streaming series for Reese Witherspoon's Legally Blonde. We're going to get a Legally Blonde TV series set when her character Elle was in high school. Stargate, meanwhile, is nowhere to be seen. And I really do think that that's because they're just trying to get Stargate right. They're thinking about it, they're rethinking about it, maybe they're overthinking it, but they're trying to get it right. They want to not screw this up because they're thinking about the big picture. They're not just thinking about the next series or movie. They're thinking about how to turn it into a successful, long-term global franchise. So if they need time to figure that out, you tell me. Is Jennifer Salke right? Are Stargate fans going to be patient too? Or is 14 years patience enough? And finally, one last thing over here at The Onion. I just saw this before I turned the camera on, so I have to share it with you. The headline is, "Emotionally distant husband would rather watch Stargate SG-1 than have honest conversation about Stargate SG-1." Describing the behavior as an avoidance strategy used to ignore difficult subjects, local woman Sophia McCabe told reporters Thursday that her emotionally distant husband Doug seemed to prefer watching Stargate SG-1 to having an honest conversation about Stargate SG-1. Quote, "It's like every time I try to ask Doug how he really feels about Colonel O'Neill and the rest of the SG-1 unit's chances against the Goa'uld, he just turns away and puts on another episode." Best line here that made my day is the last line. At press time, McCabe had reportedly sent her husband a sternly worded email asking if they might consider seeking counseling at forum.gateworld.net. We did it. Gateworld is almost 25 years old, and we made it into The Onion. Congratulations, everybody. I'll leave a link below in the description if you want to go and read this for yourself. Of course, we're still waiting for Amazon MGM Studios to make some announcement about what the next Stargate project is going to be. So in the meantime, let's hear from you. Post in the comments below what you think about anything that we've talked about today. The comments from Jennifer Salke, the idea of taking a long look at Stargate and wanting to make sure that they get it right, potentially, just like James Bond and other IP that they're working with. As well as these poll results, do they surprise you as much as they surprise me? Are you surprised that there's such a large portion of audience that seems willing to check out a reboot of the Stargate franchise, a reboot of the story? Let us know your thoughts about anything and everything in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next one.